This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good Wednesday morning, New America, and happy July 5th. Hope you had a great 4th yesterday. Joining me today, former Vice President Mike Pence, who spent his 4th of July small town parading in Iowa, and he's campaigning across the Hawkeye State today. So do not miss a minute of my conversation with former Vice President Mike Pence and many other guests on this Wednesday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. If you're wondering about our choice of bump for Wednesday, July 5, it's because on Sunday night, the Secret Service had to evacuate the Executive Mansion and the West Wing at the White House because of a white substance that was found. A hazmat recording was leaked by the Daily Mail. So we actually have a little bit of background here. Cut number 1, please.
To repeat, I didn't copy your results on the Gemini.
Gemini's results are no match found with a red bar, no match found in the library. We'll go ahead and back and come on up. Correction record has that we have a result on the Gemini. We have a yellow bar stating cocaine, hydrochloride.
So, cocaine in the White House, friends, and they had to clear the whole. They thought it was one of the white powder attacks from back in 20 years ago when that swept D.C. with the anthrax. But no, somebody in the West Wing is having a good old time. And I was a little alarmed this morning when I asked Generalissimo if we had any B-roll. And he said, we haven't got a gram, a line, or a rail of it. And I think that's an alarming bit of familiarity with the language of what someone said, the gasoline that powered the boom of the 80s, the Reagan boom. Not true. What it did was destroy a lot of lives. But somebody is tooting in the White House. We'll get back to that. I hope you had a great 4th of July. I had a wonderful 4th of July. However, this is the first 4th of July I have ever spent with a dog. Right? Ralphie is visiting from down south. And my granddog was here. I was unaware of the fact that the 4th of July is dreaded by dogs. And especially when my friend Tony, the commercial real estate guy, otherwise known as Tony Matches, and Mark the contractor, Brian the banker, and Charge the Marine decided to reenact the Battle of Falmouth when the Brits burned Falmouth to the ground. It's now sort of modern-day Portland in 1775. And they were further north than Falmouth, but they tried to reenact it. And so the bombardment went on for a couple of hours, and Ralphie almost lost his mind. I was unaware that this happened to dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I never knew.
Oh, yeah.
Keep the small children inside. Yes, I knew that. I had 3 of those myself, and I knew my granddaughter wouldn't like it. But boy, oh boy.
Our 2 dogs are going to be waking up around 3 this afternoon after their Benadryl Jones.
It's just, it was crazy. And I was unaware of that. Speaking of which, I had the other Ivy League graduate at the Hewitt barbecue last night. Jen is also a boiled hot dog person. So we had all of the smart people going with boiled hot dogs.
Did you boil your hamburgers too while you're at it?
No, we had grilled hamburgers and grilled hot dogs and boiled hot dogs. We just took a poll, and the smart people were for boiled hot dogs.
Did you boil your hot dog? Did you eat a boiled hot dog yesterday?
I did not, because I was not in charge of the grilling.
Summary judgment. It's your house.
Yeah, I was not in charge. My PhDweightloss.com has not been heard from yet. Generalissimo, did you go crazy on potato salad yesterday? I know that's your fall. I know you've fallen before.
I actually didn't have any potato. I don't even think potato salad was there. We did make the homemade ice cream though.
And so that is your. I hope you're back on your PhDweightloss.com.
I am back on the beam after slipping because of the homemade ice cream. Yes.
I want people to know that I hate potato salad. And I think of all the food groups in the world, potato salad is at the lowest. I might starve to death before I ate potato salad because it's basically mayonnaise with chunks of something in it.
Potatoes.
Yeah, and so I do not know why
Hence the name potato salad.
I do not know why anybody eats that. It is inedible. I don't get it. You could have a boiled hot dog over here.
It could have been out for 8 hours and you wouldn't know.
Yeah, until you died. Yeah. 864-644-1900. Not that we're saying myPhDweightloss.com will kill you. It won't. It will make you skinny.
It will. And it
864-644-1900. You missed your cue.
No, I didn't. You were late getting into the phone number again.
864. You were supposed. I've done it 3 times now. 864
644.
1900. All right. Let me get back to the news. Do you mind if I get back to the news? Because there was news yesterday. There was horrible news on Sunday night, a mass shooting in Philadelphia. The New York Times covering it this morning elegantly. The shooter using an assault-style rifle killed 5 people, ages 15 to 59. This is horrific. Wounded 2 others. Firing seemingly random, hitting a car, carrying a family on their way home, and those simply walking by. Police arrived to find what they described as an extensive scene of carnage. Police have not yet identified the suspect, who has not been charged. In initial reports, police described the suspect as a 40-year-old male, but authorities later clarified that they were unsure of the suspect's gender identity. In a news conference on Tuesday, used the pronouns they and them. You know, I am simply not. We got 5 victims and good people. Mr. Merritt, for example, I was reading about, is just a good dude. Lasheed Merritt, Dimer Stanton, Ralph Morales, DeJuan Brown, and Joseph Wama. And DeJuan Brown's 15 years old, spending the summer with his grandma. And they're all dead because some crazed person walks down the street with a gun. This is very, very, very similar to every other killing where you immediately say, no ideology involved. He went crazy, or she went crazy. I don't know if it's a he or a she. It's a trans person, apparently. They do know who it is. It's all over the internet, but I never use the names of mass killers. But it reminds me, we still have not seen the manifesto from the mass killer who killed the kids in Nashville. And you might ask yourself why that is. Big story yesterday out of Louisiana. A judge in Louisiana ordered Biden officials to stop trying to censor social media content. Now, that's a district court rule. District Court Judge Terry Doty of Louisiana barred White House official and multiple federal agencies from contacting social media companies with the purpose of repressing political views. This was, to me, always obvious and evident that would eventually be the ruling, because the government cannot depart from content viewpoint neutrality. I've been teaching the First Amendment for a quarter of a century. They cannot do that. And that's all they did when they were getting Twitter and everybody else not to publish, for example, Jay Bhattacharya, who is on this program. Dr. Bhattacharya has turned out to be the leading voice of reason against the CDC oligarchs and the FDA oligarchs, the NIH oligarchs, the HHS oligarchs. There are a handful of brave and hardy souls who questioned whether or not anyone besides seniors needed to be protected and who were open to alternative treatments. And they were all censored by the government, acting with the old Twitter and the still there Facebook team to be their cat's paw in suppressing dissent and therefore sending us down a terrible alley of keeping schools closed for 3 years. I never objected to the lockdown at the beginning because we didn't know what kids were going to happen to kids. As soon as we found out kids were fine, they should have said to the older teachers, stay home. Younger teachers, come in. We're going back to school. There is no threat to children. They did not do that. And we didn't get there for 2 years with extraordinary learning loss in this country because of censorship. Censorship. Xi Jinping warned Vladimir Putin against nuclear attack in Ukraine. That's a big headline today in the Financial Times. I hope so. Everyone ought to say the same thing, but it's not like Xi Jinping is running Putin. Putin is a neighboring warlord, and the neighboring warlord doesn't always stand under control of the neighboring warlord. Mark Zuckerberg is going to take on Twitter directly beginning tomorrow. We'll see how that works out. The Israeli Defense Forces have completed their mission in Jenin, Palestine, occupied West Bank, whatever you want to call it, Jordan and Samaria, Judea and Samaria. It's part of Israel. And the IDF went in strength, battalion-level strength, because of nested terrorists, and a soldier was killed yesterday. As the operation wind down, the Israeli soldier is Sergeant First Class David Yehuda Yitzhak from the elite Igaz commando unit. And one of the terrorists got him yesterday, but that was only after 7 other Israelis were rammed and stabbed in an attack in Tel Aviv. Keep your eye on that space. Big Washington Post story. Biden faces renewed pressure to embrace Supreme Court overhaul. I'll be talking about that later with former Vice President Mike Pence, who will be joining me on the program later today. Lots ahead on this July 5 edition of The Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the American Legislative Exchange Council. Visit alec.org for more info.
Good morning, White House. This is for you. Great to have you aboard, everybody. We know you're listening. Gosh, Ben Rhodes, the Metternich of MSNBC, went on a rant about me last week on some podcast. And maybe Ben was visiting. I don't know. We don't know. It's not the, but he hasn't been invited back. And neither of anyone else on that podcast, Pod Save America. But boy, oh boy, do I live in rent-free in their heads. Venture capital funds. This market update is brought to you by Birch Gold. Go to hughgold.com, or text my name, Hugh, to 989898. Dow was up 285 on Monday. The S&P up 53, the NASDAQ up 196. The 10-year Treasury continues to rise because, of course, inflation hasn't gone anywhere. And the job market strength is confusing the central bankers a little bit because they expected job growth to slow as the recession came crashing in. Some pretty dire reports about the recession coming in over the weekend and on Monday. But gold rallied to $1,939 an ounce. If you're going to open up an IRA or a 401k or a SEP IRA, you're going to roll one over into a physical precious metals backed IRA, where a third-party intermediary acts as the depository, and it's actually gold. It's not gold futures. It's not gold mines. It's not options on gold. It's gold, physical gold, maple leaves, American Eagles, Krugerrands, whatever you want. Buy the real thing. Buy it by the ounce. Put it there and leave it there, and then you will not end up having to read this story. Venture capital funds cool on plant-based meat startups. So if you invested heavily in plant-based meat startups, you're in trouble. They are not like gold. Plant-based meat startups have turned out not to be a good idea. Startups focused on plant-based meat secured $75 million from venture firms in the first quarter of this year, down from $703 million in the same period last year, according to PitchBook. So last year, there were enough dummies running around to put $703 million into plant-based meat. They have dropped by 9/10, but there's still 1/10 of dummies running around. So when I say, I only have mutual funds and Amazon and Palantir, and I let the professionals do it, I hope they are not the professionals who are investing aggressively in plant-based meat. Because that, to me, was pretty obviously not going to be gold, right? Dwayne likes plant-based meat. I do not. And I don't care what kind of hot dogs are made with plant-based meat. Whether you boil them or grill them, it doesn't matter. They're still going to taste terrible. Other story, what equity markets got wrong about China? How about the fact that you can't believe any of the data coming out about China? They're as transparent with their financial data as they were with the COVID data. So go to Birch Gold. All right, just go over to Birch Gold. While you're online this morning, we have a brand new sponsor, lowermydrugprices.com. That comes from Citizens Against Government Waste. Citizens Against Government Waste is out there working to stop Senate Bill 1339. Senate Bill 1339. So many bad bills from Bernie, I get them confused. Senate Bill 1339 will screw up the ability of pharmacy benefit managers to negotiate with drug companies, which means you'll get screwed and you'll get higher prices. Do not allow that to happen. Call up your senator and say no to Senate Bill 1339. And if you can't remember the number, like I can't from day to day, call them up and say, hey, Citizens Against Government Waste is against this, and that Council for Citizens Against Government Waste. And you can say, I'm with the Council for Citizens Against Government Waste. Or you can simply say, don't vote for any Bernie bill on drugs, because it's going to be like the cocaine in the West Wing. Nobody's going to want to own up to it other than Bernie. And Bernie will say, that's not a story. Let's talk about socializing everything. Over the weekend, Mel sent me a story on the collapse of the British National Health System, the NHS. And it's not a collapse in terms of it not functioning. It's just serving fewer and fewer people at higher and higher costs. Because socialized medicine in Great Britain, as in Canada, does not work. Because there is no cost at all connected with it. The American systems work differently. The VA is a great system when you can get an appointment and a terrible system when you can't. And that's government-funded health care. Medicare, I am experiencing for the first time. And it's remarkable for the amount of paper it generates. That's all I can tell you. It's just remarkable for how... This is 2023. Let Amazon run it. Seriously, they could privatize Social Security and we'd all be better off if they let Amazon run it. But I digress. Go over to lowermydrugprices.com and join the effort. Time for my relief factor, and it's finally not going to rain. Yesterday, St. Madurdra, I think I got that right. I had to look up the saint of weather because we had a 4th of July parade yesterday, and I was driving a truck. Well, not technically driving the truck. I was piloting the truck in the 4th of July parade, which is a challenge. And it was wonderful. But, of course, I needed my relieffactor.com, which I'm taking today. Nothing like a parade, right? More kids than I knew lived in the far north were out because candy is involved. It's sort of like Halloween in July. That's really what it is. It's a warm-up for Halloween. 4th of July parades are controlled Halloweens. And that's what I learned yesterday. And you cannot really take your eye off of the candy people in front of you because they can stop for an hour as kids try and peg the ball. But we should have been giving away relieffactor.com. I'm coming back with David Drucker. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Council for Citizens Against Government Waste.
I don't know if David Drucker knows what a rail is, but Dwayne did, and that alarmed me. David Drucker of the Dispatch joins me, chief political correspondent for the Dispatch. Good morning, David. How are you on this 5th of July?
I'm great, Hugh. Thank you very much.
Were you up last night, setting off fireworks late?
I was up last night. We spent the 4th of July. We're still here at Lake Michigan, and so there was a great fireworks show.
Sorry.
Right over the water.
I'm sorry. Were you in Michigan?
I've been in Michigan, near Grand Rapids.
I'm so
near
sorry to
Holland,
hear
Michigan, to pinpoint it for you. Yeah, well, I'm doing my penance. I'm headed to New Hampshire later today. So,
oh, good. Who are you going to go see?
Nikki Haley is primarily who I wanted to check out. We'll see if anybody else pops up. There were a number of candidates walking parades yesterday. We'll see if anybody hangs around, shows back up. I'll be in New Hampshire for a couple of days.
Well, I went down to see Nikki Haley in New Hampshire last week. If you go to an event other than Nikki, because I just saw the former governor and former ambassador, let me know. I may drive down and sit in the bleacher seats with you and observe. I wanted to use July 5, David, to review what John Ellis wrote yesterday in Political News Items. I don't know if you read it, but it was an assessment he quoted an assessment by another, no, it's John's actual assessment, that Donald Trump's hold on the Jacksonian populism base of the Republican Party is like an iron grip, that it's more than 50% and it ain't moving. And he said only one person can bring out the kind of crowd that the former president brought out in South Carolina. Agree or disagree with John Ellis of News Items?
Yeah, I don't disagree with him at all. I mean, we'll see over the course of the campaign if the grip loosens a little bit, or if some of this Trump base, wouldn't expect too much, but some significant portion looks to another candidate. I think it's possible. It's not necessarily likely, but we all know that nobody brings out a crowd like Trump, right? And that may prove yet again to reflect polling over time. It may not, right? Like we've seen campaigns before. I always stress it doesn't mean I'm saying I don't expect. I'm not making a prediction either way. What I'm saying is sometimes yard signs are reflective of polling, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes crowd size. I remember in 2012, it was Barack Obama's reelection, and there were lots of reports, not only of Mitt Romney's growing crowd, but the fact that people would show up to see Obama and disappear after 5 minutes like they were over it, right? He wasn't quite the same draw he was, but in a sense he was. So these things are sometimes reflected, sometimes not. But look, we've never seen somebody, and I wrote about this in my book, who can do in politics with a crowd and, who has the kind of high floor that Donald Trump has through thick or thin. These days, 20 years ago, if you would have said one day, some leading candidate will get indicted, 25 times, and they'll still be leading in the polls, we would have all said that person was bonkers. But here we are.
David Drucker, last week I asked Nikki Haley how many times she had been in New Hampshire already, and she'd already been there 31 times. So she's obviously putting a lot of chips on the Granite State. I think former Vice President Pence, who will be my guest later today, is putting a lot of chips on Iowa. Is that your assessment as well?
Yeah, it actually has been. Nikki Haley started out pretty equally distributing her time. She doesn't have to spend a lot of time in South Carolina. That's that's a state that's very favorable to Trump in any event. But she's that's her home state. And over time, it struck me that she's spending more and more time in New Hampshire. It makes sense from a financial standpoint, unless you're raising a ton of money, and it also makes sense if you're looking for a breakthrough of some sort. Independents can vote in the New Hampshire primary. They have to pick one, Democrat or Republican, but they can vote there. So that's not how she's presenting herself as a centrist or a moderate, but there's some more wiggle room there. And I've noticed her spending less time in Iowa, where Mike Pence was one of the few candidates there on the 4th of July, walking a parade. So we'll see what happens over time. I still kind of reserve my, what do I really think is happening until I see the debates. Presuming there's more than one, at least a couple of them, but particularly the first one, we have to see the second quarter fundraising reports. Second quarter ended Friday, but nobody wanted to release them in the middle of a holiday weekend, and maybe they're still tallying. So, we still need some metrics here. But, yeah, we've got certain candidates in Iowa, certain candidates in New Hampshire, and, obviously Trump, who hasn't done too many rallies yet, has but is able to draw a crowd and did so in South Carolina. He will be in Iowa, I believe Thursday. He'll be in Council Bluffs, which is a particularly Trumpy part of Iowa.
I want to bring up Senator Scott for a moment, who is also investing heavily in Iowa. In fact, I think he's looking for the same voters that Vice President Pence are, the evangelical west side of Iowa, which is very, very, very Dutch Reformed, right? That's what that is. And they're both putting a lot of chips on western Iowa.
Yeah, northwestern Iowa in particular. That's where Mike Pence is going to be today. My colleague Mike Warren is traveling with him. That's where Ron DeSantis is putting a lot of his chips. You know, Northwest Iowa they supported Trump, but they didn't enjoy it as much as other people in Iowa did, right? So Northwest Iowa is not just evangelical vote, but these are conservative, committed conservatives that are really, I think, looking for another choice. Again, the northwest quadrant of Iowa, the southwest quadrant of Iowa, where you can spot downtown Omaha from just across the river. They're much more favorable to Trump down there. So, yeah, and then you've got suburban Des Moines, which I think will be a mishmash of everybody trying to get a piece of that. And we haven't even talked about the rest of the state.
Well, let me very quickly. I think the debate stage will have the former president, the former vice president, as well as Senator Scott, Governor Haley, Governor DeSantis, Governor Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm not sure that Mayor Suarez, Governor Burgum, Asa Hutchinson, Will Hurd, Larry Elder make it. Of those, who is most likely, in David Drucker's view, of being the eighth person on the stage?
Well, Doug Burgum has the most personal money to spend to create the donor base, right? You've got to develop a small donor base via email and social media. He's got the money to put into it. And so I'd probably give him the nod first, and he's got the money to run the ads to satisfy the polling threshold as well. So that would be my guess there.
Yeah, I actually don't believe Mayor Suarez, Will Hurd, or Larry Elder will make it on the stage. I'm doubtful about Asa Hutchinson as well. What do you think?
Well, I'm doubtful, but Will Hurd is also very open in that he will not sign the pledge. He thinks it's ridiculous, and he won't sign it. And you need to sign a pledge saying you'll support the eventual nominee. I mean, you can mock the pledge. I mean, Chris Christie's mocking the pledge and saying, this is how he puts it. This is not me. And he will treat it with the same reverence that Donald Trump treats pledges, but he's going to sign it, right? But Will Hurd has said outright, I'm just not going to sign it. And so that unless the pledge doesn't matter as a metric, as a threshold, then I don't see how he gets on the debate stage. Suarez, I just can't figure out right now who he is or what he's doing. That could be on me. Maybe we'll see more over time. And Larry Elder, listen, I mean, I'm from L.A. originally, Hugh, you know this. I think I listened to Larry Elder the first time on the air that he ever appeared in the Los Angeles market as a substitute for Dennis Prager. So I'm familiar with Larry Elder. He's a compelling person, but I just don't see any semblance of a campaign from him.
No, I don't know. He has complained about the 40,000 donor threshold, so my assumption is he's no way he's going to make that, which is odd given that he was a well-funded candidate in the recall, but that's that. I want to ask you about Gavin Newsom. I've got an interview request into the governor of California because I think he's the likely nominee of the Democrats because I just don't believe the president's going to run. If Gavin Newsom got into it, would he be the favorite in your view, or would the vice president be the favorite?
Hard to tell, but if Joe Biden does not run, and I just believe he's going to run, but if for some reason, if you're right, and he's ultimately not the nominee, then there are many candidates that will think of getting in, and I don't think Gavin Newsom would be the only one to jump in other than, the vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris. So I just have to think that I just think there are more that would look at it and a couple that would jump in. And you have to wonder how the party would handle that. Gavin Newsom's a very interesting, compelling political figure. California has a lot of problems. And I think some Democrats would say to themselves, we like you, and we think you might be really good, but how are you going to overcome this or that problem? Maybe I should do this. There's plenty of Democrats want to be president. The party does have some up-and-comers after the past couple of elections that they can look to. And, Republicans will obviously find plenty of flaws with them, but I don't think they have to look to Gavin Newsom or the vice president unless the party, depending on timing, if this whole thing developed too late, I think the party would circle the wagons around the vice president, and that would be that. And there just wouldn't be time because you have ballot access issues and primaries and caucuses as well. And if time has passed, then it just becomes the vice president.
I got a quick. Yesterday, I was at a barbecue with the local folks who attempted to burn the house down last night. Tony, the commercial real estate guy, a.k.a. Tony Matches, wasn't there. But I talked to Mark, the contractor. Mark wants Trump to run as a Democrat because then he'll be forgiven everything, and they'll do a plea deal with him for misdemeanors. And then that gave me the thought, which is not a bad idea. Can the former president run as both a Democrat and a Republican in New York City, in New York State? You get to run as a Republican and conservative. You get to run on the liberal ticket or the socialist ticket and the Democratic ticket. Can Trump run in both the Democratic and the Republican primaries in New Hampshire? Because I think he'd punch up Donald Trump pretty badly in the Democratic primary. I mean, he'd punch up Joe Biden pretty badly in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, I don't think so. I've never looked into this, but parties do have some. They control so little these days and seem to want to control so little. But they do have control over who has their line on the ballot. The line on the ballot belongs to them. They tend to do the ballot access work. That's one of the last things parties are really good for is ballot access work and infrastructure. So I don't actually think that's possible.
Well, see, New Hampshire, which has been exiled by the Democrats into last place in America because they're going to lose all their delegates because they're going to go first because they have a state law. Their primary stuff is all in state law. So I got to go do some investigation of that and figure out. But generally speaking, just assume for a moment that Trump could run as both a Republican and a Democrat in New Hampshire with Robert Kennedy and Joe Biden. What % do you think Trump would get in the Democratic column?
Well, listen, I will just base it on this. This is pure conjecture. But given the fact that he lost New Hampshire pretty badly to Joe Biden and that polling shows him losing again pretty badly today, I don't think he'd do that well.
All right. Mark the contractor thought all would be forgiven if he registered as a Democrat and get a plea deal as well. Not a bad theory. David M. Drucker on Twitter. Good to talk to you, Mr. Drucker. Come back next week. I'll be right back, America. Mary Katharine Ham joins me. I'm going to pose the same question to her next.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. Go to myphdweightloss.com to learn more.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, full of cocaine bumps. Mary Katharine Ham knows nothing about cocaine. I assume the University of Georgia was cocaine-free when she was a bulldog. Good morning, Hammer. How are you?
Yeah, it was really more PBR in my experience.
Are you down Georgia way for the holidays?
I'm not in Georgia. I'm at the lake, so it's much the same vibe.
All right. I learned something new yesterday, and I've been around a while, so I've never had a dog on the 4th of July. I learned that dogs and fireworks do not mix.
Oh, you know what? We had 4 dogs here, and they must be very brave because none of the 4 of them have any issue with fireworks.
Oh my
They
gosh.
must be really very extraordinary dogs because they don't have they were fine.
Tony, the commercial real estate guy, otherwise known as Tony Matches, led off the second battle of Falmouth last night, and I'll tell you, Ralphie was going nuts. Mary Katharine, I've got former Vice President Pence on today, and he's over in Iowa. He's campaigning hard in Iowa, and it seems to me that the evangelical vote is the focus of both him and Tim Scott. Anybody else competing in Iowa besides Donald Trump? I mean, really competing? Or is it a three-way there?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that Tim Scott is the one who's been able to make, certainly with TV buys and with his very, very good personality and and way of connecting with people, has been able to sort of make some moments for himself. Pence, I think, of course, appeals to that type of voter, but I do think a new face like Scott has a better chance of making inroads there. And like I said, he has that very real treasure chest, and he's spending some of it there.
So Mark the contractor says to me yesterday at a barbecue, Trump should run as a Democrat. Then you get a plea deal like Hunter's on everything, and there are as many Trumpists in the Democratic Party as there are in the Republican Party, which raised the question, can you run on both tickets in New Hampshire? Could the former president run as both a Republican and a Democrat like you can do in New York on 2 lines?
Oh, that's interesting, because Biden's taking a pass, correct?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can get that together that quickly for ballot access, or can you just do it?
Well, whatever it is, it depends on. No one has ballot access issues yet because they haven't set the date of the primary. When they set the date of the primary, the deadline will go. I just don't know if you're technically allowed under New Hampshire law to go for both.
We need to ask Sununu about this.
Do you see the possibilities there?
I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities there with Biden taking the pass, because I just can't imagine that somebody with a little bit of ambition in the Democratic Party isn't like, let me do something there.
Yeah, my favorite Twitter post yesterday was out of Aspen, where a Robert Kennedy banner was eliciting the applause of our very, very enlightened, woke Aspen folk. What do you think about RFK Jr. at this point?
Look, I think, it's going to surprise you because I'm going to laud Michelle Goldberg of the New York Times, but she wrote a piece about RFK saying that he sort of leads the coalition of the distrustful. And I think
very well put.
I think she's nailed that. I think what a lot of people miss is they're trying to pin RFK Jr. on the right in this weird way, even though he's the literal Kennedy running in the Democratic Party and picking up 15 to 22%. So they're sort of pinning him on the right because they don't like his thoughts. But what they're missing is that there is this huge overlap of right-leaning and left-leaning sort of, I call them red-pilled hippies, like people who are distrustful of the government, and I might be becoming one of them, who are distrustful of the government, who look at Big Pharma with suspicion, things that the left used to be fine with, right? That was their thing. But RFK has sort of picked up the banner for those people, and it doesn't mean he's a great candidate or somebody who has a lot of good thoughts, but he is a person who unites those feelings.
I actually think he ought to just run and stay out. He ought to use the Biden strategy. Just put his name on the ballot and see what happens. In terms of what he represents, he is the antitrust candidate, and not traditional antitrust, but I have no trust in anybody candidate. Yesterday, a Louisiana district court judge, and I usually don't make much of district court decisions, enjoined the government from attempting to manipulate social media. Hooray for that Louisiana judge. Do you think Americans care about that, Mary Katharine?
They don't care about it as much as I want them to, Hugh. They really don't. And I kind of like the symbolism of it coming out on July 4th, but not a lot of people are going to be paying attention because the story's going to get a little old by the time we get to it in the news. So I hope that news gets out, and I wish that people cared that the government is using social media as its proxy to shut all of us up when we think the wrong things. But I'm not sure that they do. RFK cares. That's why
Okay, exit question. I'll listen for the answer for this if we run out of time on the Getting Hammered with Vic Mattis and Mary Katharine. That's the greatest podcast in Mrs. Hewitt's universe. If you had to guess, will we find out the identity of the leaker of the Supreme Court opinion or the owner of the White House cocaine first?
Oh, I think cocaine first.
Oh, I'm not.
Did I tell you? Did I tell you what the best tool is for figuring out who was doing lines at the White House?
Who? What?
Occam's razor.
I get it. I'm not sure everyone else does, but I get it. You know, it's.
Come on, Hughes audience. You can do it.
You can do it. Think really hard on that. That is a mind teaser, a brain teaser. Mary Katharine Ham, follow her on Twitter at NK Hammer. Listen to Getting Hammered, the podcast of choice for the fetching Mrs. Hewitt with Vic Mattis every week, even on vacation weeks. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show, straight ahead.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good Wednesday morning, New America, and happy July 5th. Hope you had a great 4th yesterday. Joining me today, former Vice President Mike Pence, who spent his 4th of July small town parading in Iowa, and he's campaigning across the Hawkeye State today. So do not miss a minute of my conversation with former Vice President Mike Pence and many other guests on this Wednesday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt from Studio North. As many of you know, I'm in the great Northeast for most of the summer, but I'm going down to Orlando a little bit later this month with Generalisimos flying from the West Coast to the annual American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC.org gathering, and they're a great sponsor of the show, and they've just released the new edition of the Rich State, Poor States. And I'm going to put a question to everyone who comes. ALEC always gives me the best guess. And the richest state in America is Florida. This is based on the ALEC analysis, followed by Utah, Arizona, and Idaho. What do those four states have in common? They are deep red state legislatures. I also want to point out that Corey DeAngelis pointed out yesterday that Mike DeWine signed a budget for the Ohio state government that includes universal school choice. Now, it is tiered. It's not the same deal for everybody. It's based on income, but that's a lot better than no school choice. Everyone can get it, so even well-off parents are going to get a little bit of a break, but it's mostly aimed at the middle and lower classes so that they can get their kids out of failing public schools and into successful private ones like Catholic schools, which are many plentiful throughout the land. That's northeastern Ohio for you Steelers fans. And the 8th state to pass universal school choice in just 2 years is Ohio. Arizona, West Virginia, Iowa, Utah, Arkansas, Florida, Oklahoma, and Ohio, in that order. Arizona, West Virginia, Iowa, Utah, Arkansas, Florida, Oklahoma, and Ohio have universal school choice. Now, I don't know where they are on this year's rating. I haven't gone through and found out where, for example, Oklahoma is in the ratings. I'd have to go, look through the rating. I always do look up Ohio. Ohio is 35th in Rich State, Poor State, which I believe is an anti-Cleveland Browns slur. But I'll talk about that with the ALEC people when we get down to Orlando. But I love Rich State, Poor State. What I'm saying is watch those rankings change as people move to the states with universal school choice, like Arizona, West Virginia, Iowa, Utah, Arkansas, Florida, Oklahoma, and Ohio. Because they realize if they want their kids to get the best education possible, they got to pull them out of public schools where they are failing or ideological greenhouses of craziness. And that's going to power those states up in the rankings. I'm going to go back to the lead story of the day. Secret Service investigating suspected cocaine found in the White House. We do have, if you missed the first hour, we do have the 911 call, or the hazmat call from the hazmat team investigate. You get white powder in the White House and you're old enough to remember it. That's a very bad thing to have happen. So someone is really stupid in the White House. Cut number one.
To repeat, I didn't copy your results on the Gemini.
Gemini's results are no match found with a red bar. No match found in the library. We'll go ahead and back. Come on up. Correction record has that. We have a result on the Gemini. We have a yellow bar stating cocaine hydrochloride. Staff number 53-21-4.
Yellow bar on the cocaine. So somebody is doing, as Dwayne said to me in the pre-show, rails, grams, or lines, and I'm a little bit disturbed that Dwayne knows that. But he was a DJ a long time ago. How long ago were you a DJ, Generalissimo? Like 1,000 years ago?
Like 1,000 years ago, so this would have been about 30 years ago.
Well, that's just about the time that everybody in the world of rock and roll was doing lines of coke, right?
You remember my first boss that you guest hosted for?
Yes.
He used to be a DJ on KMET out in Los Angeles, rock and roll DJ, before he was a Christian, right? He was a rock and roll DJ. And he told me a story because he used to hang out with, the crowd back in the 70s. He was at Barry White's recording studio once. You remember Barry White?
Well, I was there a lot, too. I never ran into him.
You probably best that you didn't, because...
Yeah, they would call in for a studio bass guy occasionally. I just got out to California in 78, so he's probably talking about the earlier 70s.
The earlier 70s, when cocaine was flowing freely.
Because I never saw that.
Right. Well,
I can assure you, I never saw that.
He said
Barry White's studio.
There was a brick of cocaine on the edge of the table.
I don't believe that. That's an urban myth.
And it hit the floor and exploded on the floor. And everybody's like, oh, he's going to be so ticked off. And apparently Barry White, according to my former boss, he just went like that. And as soon as he snapped his fingers, a brand new brick came out and replaced.
I just don't believe that. I'm not crediting that at all, because that would be libel or slander if it was false. And that is not, I don't believe that. I just don't. But I do believe that David Crosby did a lot of lines of cocaine back in the day. And in fact, if you watch Echoes from the Valley.
What do you think Keith Richards was thinking when he saw this story?
You know, he said, I didn't play the White House recently. That's what he was thinking.
He's given that, I'm impressed, applause.
There's also a lot of people who've been through there recently, mostly sports teams. But we're not going to get an answer to that any sooner than we get an answer to who leaked the Supreme Court opinion. Let me go to Joe Biden, though, because he gave a speech yesterday, sort of. It's sort of a speech. Cut number 8.
Folks, this year we honor the 50th anniversary of the all-volunteer force. 50 years. 75th anniversary of desegregating the military. And the 75th anniversary of women's official integration into the military full-blown. I've had the great honor of appointing some military commanders, haven't I, that are women. Right. Yeah. A lot. At any rate, this is a great guy, by the way. This is a great guy. He has incredible integrity. You know, we made enormous progress as a nation, and that's due to the people of this nation, the people of this nation.
You know, that I have appointed a bunch of commanders. Dwayne, have I appointed a bunch of commanders?
Yeah.
Okay, just wondering. Joe Biden vetoed Ben Wallace to lead NATO. I found that out in the Telegraph this morning. He's pushing Ursula von der Leyen, who was a terrible defense minister of Germany, and is now the head of the EU, which is appropriate for her because she's just an uber bureaucrat. If Rick Grinnell hears about this, he's not going to stop talking for days. Joe Biden vetoed Ben Wallace, and Ben Wallace is the guy who led from the front on Ukraine. Ben Wallace is the best
Virtually every foreign policy decision in the last 50 years he gets wrong, right?
He gets wrong, and he did it again. Screwed up that one. So instead, the rest of the people in NATO are saying, Ursula really was, no, I don't think so. So they've extended Jan Stoltenberg for another year, and they're going to wait out Joe Biden. Because since he didn't appoint any women commanders, he vetoed for the SecDef, Michelle, I can't remember her last name, who's over at the CNAT. And
Flournoy?
She was going to be Michelle Flournoy, that's right.
Yeah.
She was the DepSecDef under President Obama. And everyone thought that Michelle Flournoy was going to be the DepSec in the Biden administration, and he didn't. And then everyone thought we were going to get a female CNO, and then we didn't, because it turns out maybe we need someone from Pacific Command to actually do that, who understands air war and carriers and hypersonics, et cetera, et cetera. So she didn't get it. So that's why he was stumbling, because they said, Mr. President, you actually did not appoint Michelle Flournoy or the female admiral who was going to be the CNO that was being tipped. You're pushing Ursula, and you have not appointed her yet, because you don't get to do that, because NATO is actually a collective decision. And most of NATO went, what? Ursula, are you out of your minds? We actually are kind of serious about Putin. There is a great story in Ellis's news items this morning. John Ellis does news items every morning, and it's the one Substack you ought to subscribe to. If you don't want to subscribe to a dozen newspapers like I do and read them all, you just want to know what the most important thing is, you get news items by John Ellis. And the second item in today, the Russian army has lost half of its combat effectiveness in Ukraine, including as many as 2,500 tanks. And the main push of Kyiv's counteroffensive is still to come. The head of Britain's armed forces has said, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin suggested that Ukraine's counteroffensive was proceeding slowly, arguing that the pushback against Russia was, quote, never a singular act, and that Kyiv's military strategy to, quote, starve, stretch, and strike was gradually breaking down Russian defensive line. Quote, Russia is now so weak that it does not have the strength for its own counteroffensive. That's because Ben Wallace leaned forward early when Joe Biden was hanging back. And Joe Biden vetoed Ben Wallace. Honestly, we got to get through another 2 years somehow. I don't know how. I don't know why we're getting a shot at Dwayne there, Harley, but it wasn't very pleasing. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to salemnewschannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.
Ringo. That's Ringo. I don't think he's singing about the West Wing, but obviously we've got a cocaine cowboy in the West Wing, and we don't know who it is. I'm asking you, 1-800-5201-234. Will we find out the identity of the cocaine cowboy who was leaving the white stuff around the West Wing before we find out the name of the leaker of the Supreme Court decision in Dobbs? Which one will come first? Or will we actually find out anything, or will we get the manifesto of the Nashville murderer, and we find out any details about the Philadelphia murderer, as they do not fit the narrative, and therefore they're going to get memory hold? I'm not sure. But current president, I shouldn't refer to him as former president, Joe Biden gave a, quote, speech yesterday, cut number 9.
Folks, by the way, the program is still there. Anyway, you ought to contact us to make sure you know exactly how to qualify.
He doesn't have his second button. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, he loses his train of thought, and he's talking about student loans somehow. Let's play that again, and let's see if we can figure out what he's saying.
By the way, the program is still there. Anyway, you ought to contact us to make sure you know exactly how to qualify.
He knows to run away. When the teleprompter has a URL, the president now just knows, I better not do that, because I'm going to send everybody to a porn site by mistake, and then they'll be mad at me. Boy, he is something else. Joni Ernst, by contrast, on Fox with Will Cain yesterday, cut number 7.
Well, I think this is a result of President Biden's appeasement of our greatest adversaries around the world, and will count me in as one of the 39% of Americans that have extreme pride in our country. We live in the greatest nation on the face of the planet. Unfortunately, a lot of Americans see the weak leadership emanating from the White House, and I think this has caused their confidence in our government to drop. And that's extremely unfortunate, again, because we live in such
I
a
think
great
Senator
nation.
Ernst just hit the nail on the head. Confidence in the government at an all-time low, because we just don't think the president's got 52 cards. I do know that Bernie Sanders does. One of those that he dealt is Senate Bill 1339. And concerned citizens against government waste have put up a website, lowermydrugprices.com, that exists solely to stop Senate Bill 1339, which will raise your drug prices just as surely as the National Health Service in Canada and Great Britain do not get you quick appointments on major issues. That's because Bernie is a socialist, and he wants to destroy the ability of the pharmacy benefit managers to negotiate with drug companies. So head over to lowermydrugprices.com, lowermydrugprices.com, and sign up and say, whatever Bernie's for, I'm against. I'm not doing that. Wouldn't be prudent. Not going to do it. Lowermydrugprices.com. Do not forget to visit that and say, put my hand up. I want to join the team. I do not want Bernie's vision for healthcare in America, because that is not my vision for healthcare for America, which is that it actually exists and be plentiful and available. I have got my relieffactor.com right here, and my relieffactor.com exists for you who want to stay healthy so you don't have to deal with the healthcare system, meaning you do your exercise, you do your 3 miles, 10 miles, I don't know what you do. You get out, you swim, you run, you walk, you boat, you sail, you climb rocks, you go hiking. I don't care what it is. If you're doing any kind of exercise, you're going to get minor aches and pains occasionally. ReliefFactor.com. For those of you who lifted barbecues yesterday, ReliefFactor.com. For Tony Matches, he's probably got a bad back from lifting the giant rocket. Really, Tony Matches is Maine's answer to Wile E. Coyote when it comes to fireworks, and almost drove my granddog around the bend. I hope he's recovered. Really, he was not set up for that. The second battle of Falmouth last night off the coast of Maine. Over on a couple of the islands, they were putting up warning signals that they were erecting barriers because they thought an invasion force was landing. And that always happens, but I've never had a dog around me before. And poor pups do not like fireworks more than squirrels. They actually do not like fireworks more than squirrels. But ReliefFactor.com will work for everyone. Chris in Pittsburgh. Good morning, Chris. Are we going to find out the Supreme Court leaker or the West Wing line doer first?
Well, they're never going to find the Supreme Court leaker. That's done. But, hey, when I escape tax fraud and federal gun charges, which would never happen because I'm a normal human being, I like to do a whole pile blow in the West Wing. So it was Hunter.
I hadn't even thought about that. There is an incriminate. Now, I think he's in recovery, and I want to make fun of that because there are a lot of recovering cocaine addicts out there. I think he's in recovery. We would know if he isn't, but it's obvious that that's where the first. You'd ask him where he was recently, right? Has he been in the West Wing? But it's going to be some kid in the press staff. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be some 22-year-old who's a knucklehead.
Well, I don't know, Hugh. I mean, in Pittsburgh, remember when the Pirate Parrot was doing coke back in the 80s?
I don't remember anything about the 80s in Pittsburgh because I never went to Pittsburgh in the 80s. Never. I hated
Well, we were
Pittsburgh.
busy winning Super Bowls and piling up.
Oh,
those big
yesterday,
trophies.
Super 70
see
Sports put out a question. What is the biggest BS line you fell for when you were a kid? I mean, and I think that's a great question. I had my quick answer that the AFL and NFL merger would be good for the Browns. It was great for the Steelers, but that's the biggest line I fell for when I was a kid. Oh, don't worry. The NFL and the AFL are going to be great for the Browns and the Steelers. It was great for the Steelers. I think the Colts went with us as well. People don't remember the merger. When the merger struck, my dad almost gave up his Browns season tickets because he said, I'm not going to get to watch the Bears and the Eagles and real football teams, and we're going to be stuck with the Bills. Little did he know. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. You know, it's pretty hard to surprise me on bumps, but I have never heard this song before. Never. What album is this off? Johnny never even told me he recorded this. I'm pretty sure. I'm positive he never told me. We never played this together. I'm absolutely certain of that. Generalissimo, what album is this off? Oh, he doesn't know. Okay, the question, 1-800-520-1234. I have two questions. If you know anything about election law and you're in New Hampshire, or you are anywhere and you know about New Hampshire election law, can Donald Trump run in both the Republican and the Democratic primaries? Since Robert Kennedy is the only name on the ballot, Joe Biden is not campaigning, I just think he ought to run as both. That idea originated with Mark the contractor yesterday. It's a good idea. You know, contractors have to take a look at everything and they have to figure out every possibility. So he figured his first answer was, you know, Trump should just run as a Democrat and then he'll get a misdemeanor plea on everything else. And he's right. But I raised the possibility of running simultaneously, and the question is the legality of it. Second question, will we find out the identity of the cocaine cowboy in the West Wing or of the Supreme Court leaker first? Lorraine in Alexandria, Virginia. Hi, Lorraine. How are you?
Fine, thanks, Hugh. Thanks
Good
for
morning.
Everything. Good morning. It's the Supreme Court leaker who brought and did cocaine in the White House.
Oh, you know what? That's not impossible. That's not impossible because I'm quite certain that someone in the White House counsel's office was on the court last term. Although there's a good reason that they're not. Did you know that Supreme Court clerks now receive, when they join big law firms, when they leave the court? I just learned this a few months ago. Supreme Court clerks receive from many big law firms a $500,000 bonus. Did you know that?
Yes, I did. I used to cover the Supreme Court.
I am stunned by that. What does a D.C. Circuit Court clerk get now?
I have no idea. Maybe maybe too much.
I got a handshake.
I
got a handshake and a security clearance out of the deal. That's all I got. And so I went to DOJ after that. But I just am amazed that anyone would pay a clerk $500,000 to do anything. I mean, they write Supreme Court opinions, and that's great, and they advise the justices, and they work hard, and they're smart, but they don't know anything about the law. Seriously, I would never hire a Supreme Court clerk to do anything except be a research associate for about 5 years. They've been on law review. They don't know anything. They have not practiced. Go ahead.
Well, if Fauci gets $400,000 as an annual salary, almost anything's possible. But if the Supreme Court leaker did bring the cocaine to the White House, I think that's a violation of separation of powers.
It would be definitely a trail from SCOTUS over to the West Wing. Thank you, Lorraine. You know, I am pretty certain that when I was in the White House counsel's office, no one was using cocaine in the Reagan West Wing. I'm pretty sure, you know, my old boss, Dick Hauser, and Fred Filling. Dick is now on the senior tour, and he doesn't tell anyone that because he gets strokes. But I'm pretty sure I would have heard about that from either Hauser or Fielding if we had a cocaine cowboy in the Reagan White House. And those were the glory years for Studio 50, whatever it was, and the music scene for people ODing and getting hooked and dying and all that kind of stuff. Speedballing, John Belushi, all that nonsense that went on, all the tragedy that went on in the 70s and the 80s. I thought no one would be that dumb to bring cocaine to the White House. I really do not know. David in Louisville, what do you think?
I would think cocaine cowboy would be, the cowboy cocaine, whatever you're saying, because like I said, that could lead to something very dangerous. I hope they can get it as soon as they can. What do you think?
I don't think we're going to find out either of them.
Oh, my. Why do you say that?
Because there is no interest in the White House in finding out who brought cocaine to work. They want that story to go away. That is a very bad story for them. The optics of that story, it should have launched 1,000 memes. If that story had been the Trump West Wing, what do you think what do you think would cover every newspaper front page today?
I'm sure it would be the cocaine West Wing, and I'm sure it would take a lot lot of coverage, wouldn't it? The
It
CNN would probably have it as a whole, a whole hour of it, or maybe hours of it, probably.
They'd be suggesting the president did the lines. They'd be asking, they'd be getting leaks from people who hated each other in the West Wing that it was, Jared or Kellyanne or anybody, Peter Navarro would have been pointing the finger at Tony Fauci. It would have been, if we had cocaine in the West Wing in the Trump years, it's all we would be talking about. And I encourage you to go to your local channel right now and see if anybody's talking about it, because I just don't think anybody's talking about it. 1-800-520-1234. We did, however, get some Ron DeSantis yesterday. I've got former Vice President Mike Pence joining me later in the show. Ron DeSantis sat down with our friend Selena Zito on 4th of July and talked to her about what he would do when he's president on the 4th of July. Cut number 3.
Well, I think we'll do something big on the 4th, but I think we need to do a lot starting in January 2025 to really build up to that. I think this is an opportunity to do some great civics education for this country. How did we get to the point where they declared independence, and what did they do after that with the Constitution to really fortify the victory over the British? And so I would do probably a series of things. I would want to highlight some of the key founders and really get that back into the bloodstream, because that's kind of been a lost art in a lot of schools around this country. In Florida, we've really made an effort to go whole hog into this because we understand how important it is. But these are the unifying principles that make the country unique. And these are things that we need to be embracing, and we need to be proud of the history. These guys, they were not like a ragtag group of people. They all had pretty good lives. And they could have taken the path of least resistance and just kind of bowed down to the British rule. But they really believed, as a matter of principle, that if they did not have representation, if they gave an inch, then they would be consigning this whole continent to tyranny. And so they stood up when very few people would have. They risked their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. They would have been beheaded had it not succeeded. And so they were so sensitive about liberty that they were willing to wage a revolutionary war to protect what were very minor violations compared to violations we've seen in subsequent years. That is a spirit of defending liberty that I think we can really use. And so hopefully that'll be an anniversary where we'll really have a new birth of freedom in this country as we reflect on it.
I think he's talking about the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. I remember the bicentennial, and I do not know what the technical term is for 250 years, but I remember the bicentennial in 1776. It was great fun, and it does need to be celebrated the right way. One of the many ideas I sent to Team Romney that Stuart Stevens dismissed back in the day was they make a big deal about the sesquicentennial of the Civil War. And they ought to have, but they didn't. And, of course, they gave the worst speech ever at a Republican convention because Stuart wrote it and didn't talk to anyone about it. But I do want to bring to your attention, Bethany Mandel is coming up after the break. Bethany just tweeted this out. I cannot actually believe this. Like Ben & Jerry's wants to join Bud Light, except everyone already knows they're crazy. But Bethany wrote, was walking around yesterday with my kids and we wanted to get ice cream. I stood outside of Ben & Jerry's and Googled if they were still having Israel issues. But then I saw this tweet pop up on Google and was like, nah, found another ice cream spot. And the tweet was Vermont's finest Ben & Jerry's mint chocolate chip ice cream. I've just retweeted this if you want to see it. And down in the lower right-hand corner, the United States was founded on stolen indigenous land. The 4th of July, let's commit to returning it. This 4th of July. All right, the Native Americans in America were treated poorly, horribly, terribly. And they have an advocate now in Justice Gorsuch and others, unlike any that they've ever had for the treaties that they signed.
And Ben & Jerry, apparently.
Well, Ben & Jerry, the idea that the United States was founded on stolen indigenous land, that would actually suggest expropriation of existing property rights, which would suggest a prior rule of law, which would suggest that Ben & Jerry's social media people have no idea what they're talking about. But I am not surprised by that. I just return it to how much? How much do we return Vermont? I'm kind of for that. If we will return Vermont, I'm kind of for that. Go back to 49 states and whatever tribe owned.
2 fewer Democratic senators.
2 fewer Democratic senators. It's all upside.
McConnell then runs the Senate.
And, if we start with Massachusetts, that's pretty good, too. That's 4 Democratic senators. All right? So let's start there and move from there. Joseph in Scranton. Hello, Joseph. Scranton Joe, you wouldn't be the president, would you?
I'm not in Clinton. I'm in White Lake, New York.
Oh, it says you're in Scranton. Okay. Well, welcome anyway.
I'm driving towards the Scranton area. I'm listening on the Scranton radio channel.
Oh, good.
I called
good.
before. I was the rabbi who was the chaplain in the state prison over here.
Oh, yes. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Thank God. So I wanted to call about the question whether President Trump could run on multiple lines. I don't know how it works in other states, but I live in New York, and it's a very common thing for people to run as both Republicans and Democrats and all kinds of other parties in New York. And I really would like to see President Trump run in both the Republican primary and the Democrat primary, especially all those states that have open primaries.
Yes.
I know Rush Limbaugh used to talk about Project
Operation Chaos.
What he called it.
Operation Chaos.
That would be the greatest Operation Chaos if President Trump would run in both primaries.
Well, I think the New Hampshire voters who are just angry with Joe Biden for kicking them out of their place would like an opportunity to vote for Donald Trump on both tickets. But you're right. That's where I got the idea, is that it's very usual for people to get the conservative line, the Conservative Party, and the Republican line, and the liberal or the Socialist line, and the Green Party line, and the Democrat line in New York. But I don't know what New Hampshire state law is, Rabbi. Have a safe trip. I'll be right back. Bethany will update us on her Ben and Jerry's tweet, as well as her former favorite dress company, when we return to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the American Legislative Exchange Council. Visit alec.org for more info.
When there's a face on here and mommy's talking, you can't talk to mom, okay? Yep. Okay. 3 chocolate chips if you don't talk to mom, okay? Yep. 3 chocolate chips.
Welcome back, America. All cocaine bumps today. Bethany Mandel knows nothing about cocaine, and I'm glad. Good morning, Bethany. I understand you've got Genghis Kate's partner in crime sitting right there ready to jump up.
I do, and she's been offered 3 chocolate chips if she doesn't disturb me. So,
oh my goodness, that she may be looking for a 4th with a little. She got good leverage right now.
She really does.
Now, yep. I got a video of Genghis Kate yesterday who decided suddenly she could swim and did a twirl off a brick side, and I thought, oh, there go the other teeth because you already got one chipped tooth, but she made it. Yep. And then the voice of her mother was, let's not do that anymore, Kate. I want to ask you, Bethany, I've never been with a dog on a 4th of July before, but my granddog is with me. How did Truman do last night?
Not great. Not great. He was pretty much on top of me all night and like looking out the window, wondering why I wasn't alarmed that World War II was breaking out outside, World War III.
We had the second Battle of Falmouth last night because of Tony Matches. That's his nickname. Bethany, I want to get to both Ben and Jerry's and your dressmaker. Now, I don't know if you want to expand on the dressmaker. I leave it up to you, but at least tell us about Ben and Jerry's.
So, I'll tell you about both. These are 2 companies who hate their customer base. So Ben and Jerry's tweeted yesterday, America was founded on stolen land, and we should all just keep that in mind on Independence Day.
No, they said we should give it back.
Yes. I think that they should start giving back their profits. Like, lead by example, Ben and Jerry.
I'm more radical. I want to give back Vermont. I just want to start with Vermont, and then we can go from there. Maybe Massachusetts is next. But
that's fair.
It's just such a stupid comment. But Ben and Jerry's we're used to. I can't believe the dress company, at least not the kind of dress it looked like.
Yes. So I have a sort of love of old time linen dresses. I really want to look like I'm stepping out of like a 1950s housewife thing. I think the aesthetic is amazing. I can't pull it off though. But this dress company that I love, who sell $400 dresses, so I've never actually purchased a dress, featured a man in one of their advertisements 3 days ago. And they like formed a partnership with him, and they have it on their Instagram page. And instantly everyone was like, unfollow, not interested. I'm no longer purchasing any dresses from you. And I wrote about it for The Spectator. And I guess because the angry left weren't going to barbecues yesterday because America was founded on stolen land, they had a field day. The number of
I loved your tweets.
Oh my God.
I didn't even know you were a
crazy.
TERF. You're a TERF.
I kind of am though. Like I don't want to include men in women's spaces, which is what a TERF is. And so, my response is like, this is the erasure of women. It is sort of accepting the premise that anyone can be anything and that men should be fully welcomed into women's spaces. But the end result of that is the erasure of women. Women become non-men. That's the actual definition. What was it? Vanderbilt that made that definition? Women are non-men. And that women have
what I can't understand is that comes after Bud Light. It's been a solid 4 months of disaster. Look who's sneaking in.
Mm-hmm.
Look who we see her.
Sweet.
Yep. There she is. Down. Okay. That was like a Freddy Krueger movie where the villain pops up in the back.
With the red hair too.
Yeah. Don't go into the garage. Don't run towards the chainsaws. Anyway, what did the company say? Did they follow up?
Yeah, I mean, they just said, in a world where you can choose to be anything, choose to be kind, as if it's unkind for women to object to men invading in their spaces. And that's the accusation that's always thrown at women who dare to object. It is just wall-to-wall misogyny and accusations that we're being irrational and angry. Like, no, I'm actually being extremely rational, because the end result of this ideology is men in locker rooms for women, men in women's prisons. Like, the number of assaults that happen in bathrooms, 80 something % of them are in unisex bathrooms. It is dangerous for women to have this ideology in place and have men welcomed into women's spaces. And even with a dress company, I mean, this is one of those instances where I'm able to use my purchasing power and say, no, I will literally not buy into this ideology. And you have to sort of be unapologetic.
By the way, it is not anti-trans. It isn't.
No.
I just think it's absurd to argue that it's anti-trans, and the idea I'm not running with the Philadelphia shooter or the Nashville shooter as a story that in any way reflects on the T community, because it doesn't. It's just they're mentally. These two people are mentally ill people.
Yes,
mentally ill people, and every transvestite is not going to hurt you or invade your space or do anything like that. Or it's a 90% issue about people objecting to men and women's spaces. It's maybe a 95% issue, don't you think?
Yeah, no, it's becoming less and less popular. This ideology, according to polling, more and more individuals are uncomfortable with the idea of men participating in women's sports, for example. This is a losing ideology. And I think that unlike gay marriage, they sort of thought that they could bully their way through it and eventually the tide would turn. The tide isn't turning for them.
No, the tide is growing because common sense is everywhere triumphing. Yep. Bethany, thank you. Good luck with your, I don't know if the fourth chocolate chip comes through. I did love that bit, though.
No.
There's a little bit of horror movie. 2 chocolate chips. All right. Yep. Bethany Mandel. Follow her on Twitter at Bethany Sean Dark. Read all of her work at The Spectator. And I'll be right back with hour number 3. Vice President Pence joining me next hour on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good Wednesday morning, New America, and happy July 5th. Hope you had a great 4th yesterday. Joining me today, former Vice President Mike Pence, who spent his 4th of July small town parading in Iowa, and he's campaigning across the Hawkeye State today. So do not miss a minute of my conversation with former Vice President Mike Pence and many other guests on this Wednesday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Can you tell? Tell if I watch the screen.
Morning Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live on July 5 from Studio North. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, former Vice President Mike Pence joins me from Iowa. I start, though, with Kristen Waggoner. She is CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom, and congratulations are in order because not only is ADF having a great decade, you won the Supreme Court case that has on most people's lips, 303 Creative. You argued it, Kristen. Congratulations. That's got to feel, I've never experienced that satisfaction. I know what it's like to win at the circuit. How's it feel to win at the Supreme Court?
It feels amazing. It has been a long journey, and we have represented a number of clients, including Lori Smith, who just seek to be able to speak freely. And so to have the court reaffirm that basic principle in this cultural moment is just an amazing feeling.
It's a free speech win that followed by a free exercise win. Generally speaking, before I get into the specifics of 303 Creative and the aftermath, I believe that constitutional common law casebooks will date the end of the Roe era to the last 14 months. Like Lochner doesn't have a hard end, the Lochner era. I think the Roe era is over, but I think it took 14 months to close the book. What do you think?
Well, I certainly hope so. That's what we're seeing, and the discussion and debate is occurring in the states where it ought to have been in the first place, and we're actively protecting life across the states right now. So I do think that era is over, and I think a new era is coming in with the court in essentially reining back administrative overreach, government overreach, and returning to what the Constitution says other than what judges wanted to say.
You know, I believe the end of the Roe era means more than the end of Roe and Casey, but it goes to the entire incoherence that began in 1973. I think the Warren Court was actually a very good functioning court in most of its major decisions, and the Warren Court era is distinct. That era was just marked by confusion and doctrinal absurdity, and I think what 303 Creative, to go back, remember Justice Scalia writing once that abortion had destroyed First Amendment free expression speech because it had caused all this distortion in the law? Part of that distortion is remedied by 303 Creative. I think we really actually have a rule now. How would you articulate the rule, Kristen Waggoner?
I would articulate it the same way the majority did, which is that the government cannot force people to say things they don't believe. It's that simple, and the court made it that simple. Now, certainly in this particular instance, non-discrimination laws continue to apply to ensure that no one is denied equal treatment, access to goods and services because of a protected characteristic, but the government cannot compel anyone to speak a message and misuse those laws in order to silence, censor, or punish speech that it dislikes.
Kristen, now, how would you explain the test? Because the hypotheticals I've used on my law students over the years are, if you're a caterer offering chairs and tables, you've got to serve every same-sex wedding and heterosexual wedding out there. But if you've got any artistic expression involved in your services, no, you don't. Is that a fair summary in your view?
Yes. I mean, as you know, in law schools, there's all kinds of crazy hypotheticals you can deal with. But I think the court articulated the test the same way that it has for many, many years, which is it's the affects the message test. Is the government affecting the speaker's message? And if it is, then that's compelled speech. And we see that test used throughout the free speech jurisprudence over the years. They simply applied it in this moment, which government officials haven't been wanting to do. They've been wanting to misuse the law to compel speech in ways they never have in the past.
Now, I got to ask you about the blowback, because almost instantly after a big 6-3 win, there is, this is a fake case. As though, again, bad legal takes are not uncommon on Twitter, but stipulated facts are stipulated facts. Do you want to explain, Kristen?
I do. Thank you for asking. The blowback we knew that they would try to do everything they could to delegitimize the court and the decision. But I have to tell you, Hugh, I've never seen anything quite like what we've experienced this last weekend. Newsweek, you may have seen, reported that the attorneys involved in the case should face criminal penalties or disbarment. And it's just activist journalist reporting. The facts that are being reported about the case are simply not true. Never mind that, as you said, Colorado agreed to those facts. But the facts that Colorado agreed to are accurate. The second thing to remember about this is 13 federal judges have passed on this case. And even the one that ruled against us said there is a case or controversy here. There is standing. This is not a fake case. And I don't know how you could conclude otherwise when you've got someone like Lori who's sitting there watching with a front row seat to Colorado aggressively pursuing Jack Phillips and suggest somehow that Colorado defending its law 7 years with Lori is somehow this is a fake controversy. They've said they will prosecute her, and they have prosecuted Jack, not once, but twice. He's still in court today under this same law.
The new narrative is simply fake news. Next to a dictionary definition of fake news should be the left's critique of 303 Creative, in which they say Lori Smith invented a threat. No, she didn't. The state of Colorado stipulated it is bad journalism. It's not reporting. It's actually just activism to report anything else.
It absolutely is. And the fact that we have prominent lawyers and even a current cabinet member of the Biden administration, a former chief of staff weighing in on this, just blatantly, and a Supreme Court advocate, well known, is blatantly distorting the law, blatantly distorting the facts of this case. And it's deeply disheartening. If you want to engage with the merits of the court's decision. Don't engage in distorting and misrepresenting what actually happened.
Well, I think the reason people don't on the left want to engage with the facts and the decision is that it's persuasive, Kristen Waggoner. It is simply, whether you look at Dale, whether you look at Hurley, all the case law is always the same. The government may not coerce people into adopting viewpoints that are not their own. I even think of the live free or die to my south is New Hampshire. They can't even make you put that on your license plate. And yet that is abandoned in the analysis of 303 Creative, which is a hallmark case.
It is, and I would encourage every American to read it. All of your leaders, all of your audience members should read the decision for themselves. It is a tour de force of First Amendment law, goes through all the cases and why free speech is so important to us, how it curbs government authority, government tyranny, how it allows us to have economic freedoms and other freedoms, and just the fact that just the ability to reason and to think hinges on this type of freedom, and that if we want it for ourselves, we have to defend it for others. People like Lori, you may not agree with her views on marriage, but let me tell you, if the government can compel her, it can compel all of us.
Kristen Waggoner, that is the bottom line. Let me talk a little bit about Alliance Defending Freedom. What is the agenda for next year? Do you have anything before the court next year? Because you guys seem to win pretty much 9 out of 10 cases. What's your record over the last dozen years?
15 wins. This was our 15th over 12 years. So we're extremely grateful.
Well, I want everyone to know that. I want everyone to support alliancedefends.org. But what's on tap for the next term? I always want to know, what have you done for me lately? You just want a big free expression case. What have you done for me lately?
Well, we were so pleased to be on Mississippi's legal team in Dobbs, which overturned Roe, and now this 303 Creative case. We have a petition right now. It's called Tingley, which is before the court, which is another free speech case. And we're hoping that the court will take that, because 100 jurisdictions have laws right now that are essentially suppressing the right of parents to have their children seek counseling with licensed counselors and have counseling consistent with their faith. We also are watching the case that the court has granted on the Chevron deference, again, making sure that that government overreach is reined in, and there will be more petitions as well.
Last question, Kristen. About a year ago, Justice Barrett raised the question of what comes after we reverse Employment Division v. Smith. And she just put it out there. It's on the way. It's going out with the Roe era. What do you think ought to replace it?
I think that's a really tough question. But I also think that even if it's a strict scrutiny analysis, if the court reinstitutes what strict scrutiny means, and sort of reorients the lower court, strict scrutiny would work as well. We know that compelling interest at one point meant compelling interest. And somehow the activist courts have refused to honor that standard. We have the court's decision in Groff this last term, as you saw, where the court essentially said, again, this is what this means in this statute. And it returned the lower courts to reading the statutes and reading the tests as they're meant to be. So strict scrutiny is certainly an option, but we also know the court's looking back at historical standards as well. So you could root that standard in history and tradition as well.
Excellent answer. Quick exit question. Has anyone on the left stood up against the idiocy characterizing 303 Creative as a made-up case? Has anyone on the left distinguished themselves for courage, in other words?
Well, Nadine Strassen sure has. She appeared with me at Yale on 303. And, frankly, we wrote an op-ed together and can't get any major publication to print it after the 303 decision. Nadine Strassen is the former president of the ACLU, and she doesn't agree with us on Masterpiece Cake Shop in terms of whether cakes are speech, but she does agree with us on 303 and that free speech is for everyone. And it's just been shocking to me that no one else is standing up and engaging on the merits. But I think that's also why we're seeing attacks against our integrity.
Yeah, they're just flat out cornered, and the silence on the left is deafening. Kristen, congratulations. Well argued, well briefed, well done. As Alliance Defending Freedom continues to defend the freedom of every American, go to alliancedefends.org and help them out, because every term is a new term. Stay tuned, America. I'm coming right back. 22 minutes after the hour, America. Hugh Hewitt, former Vice President Mike Pence joins me after the break. We will not give him a cocaine bump because it's the serious interview of the day. We will not give him a cocaine bump. But I will give you an update on the 10-year Treasury because I hate to be right about things that hurt you. But if you were going to buy a house and you were hoping that interest rates would start to come down, no. AndrewandTodd.com have been telling people for a long time, and I hope you go there if you're buying a house or a second house, or you have to refinance, or you're getting moved and relocated, and you're going to have to go find. I want you to go to AndrewandTodd.com. There was Sierra Pacific Mortgage. And at Sierra Pacific Mortgage, they are soup to nuts lenders, and the 10-year Treasury right now is at 3.878%. All right, so it continues to go up, because inflation is not going down. It's stuck at 4% year over year. It's not what it was last summer, but it's still very, very high. And the 30-year fixed is still in the 6s, maybe the 7s. Still better than you'll get in a month or 2 months, because I don't think the Fed is done raising rates yet. In fact, they have said that as much, that it's at least 1 and probably 2 or more rate hikes are coming. So if you wait around to borrow money to buy a home, you got your down payment together, you want to go out and get into the home buying market, you're tired of paying rent, call Andrew and Todd today, 888-888-1172, because it's not getting cheaper. It's becoming more expensive with every month to buy a house. So, and that's because people are not selling their houses. The inventory is about 2 months. The normal inventory is about 6 months, because folks realize that there are fewer buyers. And if they put their house out there, they're still not negotiating with you. They're saying, I'll wait for an all-cash offer. Maybe you shouldn't want to wait, and maybe you don't have an all-cash offer or even close to it, but you got a good down payment. You can get a pre-qualification letter from AndrewandTodd.com and do it quickly. 888-888-1172, or just go online and find it there. 888-888-1172. I want to go back to the president yesterday and his 4th of July event or remarks. I just think we're going to play all the Republican candidates on the grand old pod. I got lots of Republican candidates doing parades. I got the vice president coming up. But we only have yesterday, the president came out once for a brief moment at a 4th of July event/speech, cut number 8.
Folks, this year we honor the 50th anniversary of the all-volunteer force. 50 years. 75th anniversary of desegregating the military. And the 75th anniversary of women's official integration into the military full-blown. I've had the great honor of appointing some military commanders, haven't I, that are women. Right. Yeah. A lot.
Who said right? Who said right? Who is the president's fact checker on the side? We don't know who said right. Go ahead, continue. He had no idea, because what he's confused about is that the Telegraph reports this morning that the president vetoed British Defense Minister Ben Wallace from becoming the new Secretary General of NATO. He would have been a superb Secretary General of NATO. Rishi Sunak, the greatest alliance we've got in history, is with the Brits after we revolted from them, after the 1812 incident, and after the Battle of Lake Erie decimated the British at sea for the first time in their history. The Brits came around and they became the special partnership, special relationship. And Ben Wallace is their Secretary of Defense. He runs the Ministry of Defense, and he's very, very good. He ought to have stood for prime minister. If they had, the conservatives might have a better chance. They're not out of it. Rishi is doing a pretty good job as prime minister, Rishi Sunak. They're not out of it, but Ben Wallace would have made a great minister of defense, becoming a great Secretary General of the NATO alliance. Right now, it's Jens Stoltenberg, and he's very good. And he's been there, I think, 10 years, 9 years. You got to stick around an extra year, because no one. Turns out Joe Biden is pushing Ursula, the failed German defense minister that they had to move over to the EU to get out of the German Ministry of Defense because she was a failure. And Ursula von der Leyen, Biden wants her to be NATO chief. Nobody else does, because everybody else remembers her as the German defense minister who screwed up Germany's defense ministry. But everybody else wants Ben But Joe Biden vetoed it because he wants to appoint a woman commander in Europe, not having done so in the United States, having passed over Michelle Flournoy as Secretary of Defense, and instead having Secretary Austin. I don't understand this White House at all. I do understand ReliefFactor.com. It is a sponsor of the show. I'm holding it up if you're watching on the Salem News Channel because ReliefFactor.com sponsors the studio. The ReliefFactor.com studio, more importantly, keeps me going, keeps me moving. The rain has stopped in the Northeast. It's been raining for a month, and it rained yesterday until morning parade time. Rain stopped. Then it resumed. Then afternoon barbecue and fireworks had stopped again. Saint Moderdus, I believe, is the patron saint of weather and thieves. I don't know why, but he is. And he came through in the Northeast yesterday in time for barbecues and parades, and we had a great parade. Small town America loves its 4th of July parades, and they really are quite remarkable. And the kids turn out because it's sort of a warm-up for Halloween. They're getting ready. It's Halloween without the costumes. If you're at a 4th of July parade and they're not giving out candy, something's wrong with your town. And small town bike parades, block bike parades, it's all great. But ReliefFactor.com, if you did anything funny to your back yesterday lifting the barbecue, ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 for the 3-week starter pack. Coming back with Vice President Pence. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt from Studio North. Pleased to welcome back to the program former Vice President Mike Pence. Good morning, Mr. Vice President. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me on.
I was watching Twitter yesterday. I saw you were campaigning in small-town Iowa doing 4th of July parades. Where were you?
We were in Urbandale, which is just suburban Des Moines. I'll tell you, it was a great 4th of July day in the heartland. It was real hot, and the crowd was huge. And I got to tell you, Karen and I just loved being out, celebrating Independence Day, and being with so many friends. It was terrific. We're actually in Sioux Center, Iowa today. We're going to burn up most of the whole week traveling across Iowa, and just really encouraged, almost now a month in from when we announced our campaign for President of the United States. People can get more information, of course, Hugh, at MikePence2024.com, but we're hearing from folks all over Iowa, all over the country, and very, very excited about the opportunity to contend to lead not only this party, but lead this country back to the strength and prosperity that the American people so richly deserve.
Well, Vice President Pence, I want to cover some serious stuff with you, but I want to begin with just sort of a counterfactual. If cocaine had been found in the Trump-Pence West Wing, what would the news cycle look like today?
Unbelievable. It would be wall-to-wall. And frankly, it should be. I mean, if the news accounts I read are right, this was not in the White House complex, right? I mean, you and I know the terrain real well. This was in the residence itself, if I understand. It was in the library in the White House. And I have to tell you, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we ought to know who the leaker was at the Supreme Court who leaked the early version of the Dobbs case. We ought to know in real time who brought and left cocaine on a table in the residence in the White House, but I'm not holding my breath.
No, I've seen some other reporting that's in a workspace in the West Wing. Either way, it would have been 24/7 on every cable channel, and they would be getting leaks from everywhere except your staff, which never leaked. Mr. Vice President, let's get serious. The best question that Brett Baer asked former President Trump is, who would work for you? I'm paraphrasing it, because he ran through everyone that the former president had fired and was upset with. And my question to you is, do you think Mike Pence could staff a better administration than Donald Trump if you succeed in getting the Republican nomination and not the former president?
Well, I got to tell you, we had a town hall on the afternoon of the 4th of July in Boone, Iowa yesterday. The room was packed. And it's one of the things I said to one of the folks that were there. I said, look, one of the things that compels me and my wife Karen to step into this race is because I really do believe that the relationships that we built when I was a conservative leader in the Congress, the relationships I built when I served as governor of Indiana, and the relationships I built as vice president convinced me that not only would I know what to do on day one to restore American strength and prosperity, but I know we could assemble a team, I think better than anybody else in the field, that would turn this country around. And Hugh, you've been at this a long time. You know how administrations work, and it's not only about knowing what to do, it's about being able to assemble a team that can help you get it done. And I really believe in my heart of hearts, with all humility, that because of the experience that we would bring to this, we could assemble a better team than anybody else in the field, a team of experience, a team of character, and a team that would know the conservative principles and policies that will strengthen America at home and abroad.
You know, a lot of Americans would love to know sort of a short list of who's going to be who in a cabinet. And there's always an argument that you cannot promise people jobs. But as former President Trump demonstrated, as you demonstrated in the campaign of 2016, you can't put out lists of people who might be in the administration.
Sure.
Will you do that for justices and for maybe cabinet members?
Oh, I think there's no question that making it clear that we're going to continue to appoint judges to our courts at every level that are going to strictly construe the Constitution, that are going to apply the law and not rewrite the law is job one. And I think putting out a list, I think it was one of the bold moves that candidate Donald Trump did in 2016, and then we lived up to that. We added to the list, but they were all men and women of the same caliber and character, and the decisions by the Supreme Court this past week alone give evidence of the fact that we kept faith with that standard. So we'll absolutely do that. And, you know, the last time we talked to you, you suggested the idea of at some point, as if the good Lord and the American people continue to bless this opportunity for our family, giving greater definition to what that team would look like makes a whole lot of sense to me. But I really do believe. I mean, what compels us, the sense of calling Karen and I have for this, as I said here in Iowa yesterday, and we'll say again today, is I really believe with all humility that based on my 20 years of service in the Congress and as a governor and as vice president serving at home and abroad, we would know what to do and who to do it with on day one to turn this country around. And that's what drives us to this campaign.
If you had a middle name, it would probably be Probity. I mean, if we made one up for you, it would be Probity. What do you think ought to what ought to drive selection for cabinet and senior staff members in a White House, in a new administration?
Well, I just think integrity. You're going to appoint people that share your view. You're going to appoint people that share your philosophy, whether it be about the economy, whether it be about values, whether it be about America's place in the world. But then having men and women that will live that out with personal integrity, that they'll assemble a team of character, and then a team that will keep faith with what those policies are is key. Washington, D.C., personnel is policy. I mean, the wreckage and ruin that the Biden administration has wrought on America in 2.5 short years is evidence not only of failed leadership at the top, but failed leadership all across the board of their cabinet. And so having men and women who have integrity not only in their character, but also integrity to the policies that we know will turn this country around. We can get it all back. We can bring it all back and then some, quicker than anybody could possibly imagine. But it's going to take a team of experience and of character and a president with the vision to drive that agenda, build on our highest American ideals.
That brings me, Mr. Vice President, to Janet Yellen's trip to Beijing. Now, one of the crowning achievements of the Trump-Pence years was clarity about the communists in China. And you began that, a series of 5 speeches that included the Attorney General Barr and FBI Director Wray, National Security Advisor O'Brien, and then at the Nixon Library, Secretary of State Pompeo. It was the repudiation of 45 years of a mistake, which was we thought they would evolve towards a free market economy. What do you make of Janet Yellen going after Tony Blinken went? It looks like appeasement to me. What does it look like to Mike Pence?
Appeasement has never worked any time in history. And I just have to tell you, after they floated a Chinese balloon across strategic sites in our country, after they buzzed our aircraft in the Asia Pacific and then, cut off in front of it was literally within days that we learned that the Secretary of State was going hat in hand, here was the thing, without even a promise that he was going to meet with Xi. Remember? It was not yet confirmed that even Xi was going to give him an audience. And I got to tell you, they got a term for that over that way. It's called kowtowing.
Yep.
And that's something our administration never did. We never kowtowed to the Chinese. We stood firm with them. We told them how things were going to be, that things were going to change, and that we were going to defend freedom of navigation in the Asia Pacific. We're going to call them out on human rights. We're going to call them out on trade abuses and intellectual property theft. And we imposed $250 billion in tariffs on them. And frankly, this administration, while they haven't gone backwards on those tariffs, they should have been ratcheting it up. And we're going to have a longer conversation someday about what we ought to be doing in our national defense. I mean, it's amazing to me to see Joe Biden spend the first 2 years of this administration essentially cutting our national defense, and even this really recent debt ceiling deal. If they don't work out agreements and pass all their appropriations bill, that's going to be about a 1% cut after inflation in our defense spending at a time that China's floating a new battleship. I'm not surprised that Janet Yellen's heading over there because the borrower's got to talk to the lender, right? I guess that's the attitude. What we ought to do is we ought to be putting our fiscal house in order. We ought to be reforming entitlements for younger Americans. We ought to put ourselves on a trajectory of fiscal solvency, and then we won't have to go hat in hand to the Chinese communists or anybody else. We make America strong on our own.
Last week, Mr. Vice President, Mayor of Miami Suarez was on the program. He didn't know what the Uyghurs were. He said he didn't understand my pronunciation, but there's really only one pronunciation, and he's entitled to his own defense. But what do you think about the Uyghurs? Ought Republicans to be talking about the genocide that the Trump-Pence administration declared formally on Mike Pompeo's last day as Secretary of State?
Well, look, when you think of essentially what amount to, I guess we'll just say detainment camps that have been assembled by the Chinese communists, rounding up over 1 million Muslim Uyghurs into these camps. It's I think we got to call it the way we see it. I think there is an effort here at ethnic cleansing that's going on in China, but it's just part and parcel of the repression in communist China. I mean, you've had a repression not only of Muslim Uyghurs, but you've had Christian pastors that have been jailed. You've had other religious minorities that have been repressed, and we just got to continue to speak the truth on the world stage about what's happening in China. We also got to speak the truth about the war crimes that are continuing to take place in Ukraine. I was in Ukraine last week. Spent a day. I not only got a security briefing from the Ukrainian military and met with President Zelensky, but I walked the streets of Bucha, where in the initial days of the Russian invasion, the soldiers walked down that street and shot down more than 500 men, women, and children of every age, and left their bodies to rot on the sidewalks. And then when the citizens of the town came to the Russians and said, "Can we go collect our loved ones from the streets?" as they came out, they began to shoot many of them as they were collecting their loved ones. There was a mass grave that was built by the church. We laid a wreath last week. I mean, I must tell you that what's going on in Ukraine right now is not just war; it's evil.
The kidnapping of Ukrainian children has not gotten much attention. Did you discuss that with President Zelensky or anyone in Ukraine?
Well, we didn't just discuss it. We actually went by a relief organization that has been set up to bring Ukrainian children back. 19,000 kids have been abducted and hauled off to Russia in the areas after the Russian invasion that are under their control. And I think at the relief organization where we visited, which these are incredible people, I think they said they had returned about 300 of the kids yet, restored them back to their families. The Russians are stonewalling everything. But, I mean, it's just incredible. It's like what I said. I mean, what's going on in Ukraine is not just warfare. It's evil. And frankly, I really left more resolved than ever that it is in our national interest to give the Ukrainian military the support they need to fight and to repel this Russian invasion. I have no doubt that if Vladimir Putin is now facing profound divisions within his own country and his own military, I have no doubt that Vladimir Putin overran Ukraine. It would not be too long, Hugh, before the Russian military crossed the border where we would have to send our fighting men and women to fight against them. So I'm a guy who believes in that old Reagan doctrine. If you're willing to fight the enemies of the United States on your soil, we'll give you the means to fight them there, so our men and women in uniform don't have to fight them. And I'm going to continue to be a voice for that in this campaign and all across this country.
Let me turn to another Hoosier, fellow Hoosier with you, Amy Coney Barrett. Justice Barrett wrote a concurrence last week on the major questions doctrine that must have made every Hoosier proud and every Notre Dame law grad proud, and I'm sure every Indiana proud. What did you make of her concurrence, and what did you make of the term just concluded?
Well, I must tell you, I haven't gotten to read all of the concurrences and all the majority opinions from last week, but the people of Indiana couldn't be more proud of Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She is a principled, strict constructionist, a jurist, and I know she's having a profound influence. But one of the things I love about her, some of the clips I did read, is she's willing to talk as an everyday American. I mean, she's brilliant, right?
Yeah.
But she's also a devoted mom, devoted wife. She's proud of it. She's proud of her family. She's proud of her pro-life views. But the decisions last week, whether it be moving us toward a colorblind society by ending affirmative action, or whether it was two incredibly important decisions upholding religious liberty in this country, I'm so proud of Justice Barrett, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh, and this strong conservative majority that's upholding really the highest ideals and God-given liberties of the American people.
Mr. Vice President, let's talk briefly about the debates. First of all, will you sign the pledge that Chairwoman McDaniel has put forward that you will support the eventual nominee as a precondition of debate appearances?
Yeah, I've made that clear. Look, I started out in politics as a teenager as a Democrat, Hugh. But I know you were already involved in politics back at that time. But it was the voice of Ronald Reagan that drew me to the Republican Party. I mean, it was in his voice I heard the ideals that my combat veteran father, who would have been 94 years old today, and my grandfather, who was an Irish immigrant, taught me to believe in. So I joined the Republican Party. I have supported every Republican nominee for president since I joined the Republican Party in the 1980s, and I'll be supporting the Republican nominee, and especially if it's me.
Now, will you be at the first debate? I know you'll qualify, but will you go if everyone else doesn't go? I mean, will Mike Pence be there regardless?
I'm going because, look, I have a little bit of experience with nationally televised debating, and some people think we did all right. But to me, the thing you got to remember about these debates, and you've been involved with them on the other side of the table, is you're not talking to each other. You're talking to the American people. I wouldn't pass up on the opportunity to talk to the American people about our vision, our experience, our love for this country, for anything. So you better believe it. I'm going to be in Milwaukee. We'll be on that debate stage, and wherever two or more Republican candidates for president are gathered, there I will be also.
Now, the former president is not subtle when he goes after people. How are you going to deal with that? Since you two were joined at the hip for 4 years, and now you're divorced, and he doesn't hesitate to swing at anyone. How are you going to deal with that?
Well, yeah, people ask me all the time. They said, "How do you envision debating Donald Trump?" And I tell them I've debated Donald Trump 1,000 times, just never with the cameras on. We had a close working relationship for 4 years. I'm incredibly proud. Well, some of the candidates for president are criticizing the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I'm proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I'll defend it everywhere I go. But didn't mean the president and I always agreed. I know how to have a good policy debate with the president, and I'd look forward to it. And I sure do hope he comes to every single one of those debates.
Now, you are a very good lawyer, and so when I say the Lochner era marked a bad era in the Supreme Court, when I say the Roe era, which I date from 1973 to last week, it's over, it's done, closed with the repudiation of affirmative action, which is the first case I ever learned because I had, as an undergraduate, Archibald Cox teaching me about Bakke. I have seen the left push back on that decision, and I have seen them argue that legacy admissions are somehow the same. They are not, and I think it's important for people to understand the difference. How do you defend schools that, for example, give an advantage to the children of alumni, but do not and now are forbidden expressly by the court from taking race, ethnicity, and religion into account?
Well, well, first off, let's just celebrate the decision. I may go ahead and borrow your phrase, Hugh, that we're in a new era. I say we've come to a new beginning for life, thanks to that conservative majority that we strengthened with 3 appointments, and to have seen Roe versus Wade sent to the ash heap of history where it belongs is going to be a great source of pride for me the rest of my life. But to your point, I mean, now this court is beginning to demonstrate that they're bringing that philosophy to every decision. And with regard to affirmative action, first and foremost, I think it's a recognition that there was a time, I believe, in this country where we needed to open up the doors of higher education to minorities, particularly African Americans. But that time has passed. And it was even Justice Sandra Day O'Connor who said some 20 years ago that she assumed it would pass after maybe a quarter of a century. It went away quicker. And I think it's a tribute to the incredible accomplishments of African Americans who've demonstrated the ability to compete and to succeed on any campus in this country, and also other minorities. And so I celebrate and welcome that decision greatly as moving us toward a colorblind society, a society there everyone can achieve on the basis of hard work and merit and character, just as Dr. Martin Luther King talked about in that extraordinary speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. But at the end of the day, I do think sorting all of this out. I'm a great champion of our military academies as well. Whether it's a legacy issue at these Ivy League schools, or whether it be the exemption for military academies, it seems to me that there's going to need to be more clarity from the courts about how this goes forward. But we ought to. I think we've got a court that is committed to our ideal of having a colorblind society, and I couldn't be more proud about that.
Mr. Vice President, you remind me, when you bring up the military academies, that you are a military dad. You've got an active duty son flying fighter pilot stuff, and you've got an active duty son-in-law flying fighter pilot stuff. One made the right choice and went in the Navy. One made the choice and became a Marine. So I'm not sure who the better pilot is, but tell me what you think about this defense budget. They'll tell you. I know they'll tell you, but I hope you never have to arbitrate that debate. This defense budget does not keep pace with inflation. That means things like training missions for fighter pilots get cut. The gasoline gets cut. The numbers of everything gets cut. Do you hope they plus that up?
Hugh Hewitt, you're the only person in the country talking about it, maybe other than me. But the Biden administration has been cutting back on our defense spending at a time that the world is becoming more dangerous by the day. I mean, we have members even in my own party that are talking about it, kind of walking away from America's leadership in the world as war rages in Eastern Europe. I mean, we've spent 3% of our defense budget in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are fighting and now making progress against this unconscionable Russian invasion. But the truth of the matter is that the core of that anxiety is I think the American people know that we are not resupplying the arsenal of democracy. We are not building a military fitted for the new challenges in the balance of the 21st century. There's real cost to all of this. And as you say, as the father of a Marine, the father-in-law of a naval aviator, I got to tell you, we got to stand by our men and women in uniform, and I think job one of the next Republican president is not just to catch up on the cuts that are being precipitated by the Biden administration, but literally to engage the American people in rebuilding a military, or let me say it better, building a military fitted to the challenges in the world of the 21st century. We are not there. We don't have that vision. But if I have the privilege of being president of the United States, we'll build a military that from the Asia Pacific to the wider world, to the Middle East, to Europe, will be fitted to the times, and we'll have peace through strength.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, last question. Last week I drove down to New Hampshire to see Nikki Haley. Did a fabulous job. Morgan Ortega's running a town hall. When you're in New Hampshire, I hope you let me know so I can come down and sit in the bleacher seats and watch from the back of the room. But it's a talented field. You've got, Governor Christie, Governor DeSantis, you've got Nikki Haley, you've got Senator Scott, and you have the former president. How do any of you, as John Ellis said yesterday, loosen the former president's grip on his 55 to 60% of the Republican base?
Well, I just think, look, I have great confidence in Republican primary voters. Whether it's, I'll head out in a few minutes here in Sioux Center, Iowa. We'll be in, we'll be in Lamar's. We'll be dropping off at the Blue Bunny there. We're going small town to small town. I'm going to visit all 99 counties here in Iowa, and we're going to do the same in New Hampshire. And I think it's, the great thing about this process is the American people have a chance to take a fresh look at all of the candidates, and I have every confidence the people of this country, and particularly Republican primary voters, are going to choose the right standard bearer for this time. I've said before, nobody could have defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 other than Donald Trump. Republican primary voters knew that. As you know, I actually endorsed a different candidate in the Indiana primary in 2016, but I was proud to campaign with him, proud to serve with him for 4 years. We had a falling out at the end. We still have a profound difference of opinion on what the Constitution required of me that day. But I'm proud of that record, and I have every confidence that Republican primary voters are going to choose wisely once again. We're going to have the right standard bearer, and we're not only going to lead to victory in the White House in 2024. We're going to win the White House. We're going to win the Senate. We're going to have a wider majority in the House of Representatives, state houses around the country.